Okay, guys, welcome back to the eighth session of the pluralism course. And mashallah, this is, really interesting. We're coming to the end of the series. So we got two courses left, two sessions left after the end of this session, inshallah. So I just want to do a brief recap about the previous session because I think it was like quite text heavy. And it's not something I want to skim over. I really want us to have like some kind of grasp over some of the more fundamental ideas that we came across in the previous session because it's just so important, right? So in the previous session, this was really the introduction to the tools that we need and can use to connect to the non-Abrahamic religions, to the non-Abrahamic religions. And so the primary tools were what? We talked about ijtihad, and we talked about something called rahbaniya, right? And so for Sheikh al-Akbar, ijtihad is something that is permissible in the usul and it is permissible in the furu', right? Now, the ulama normally permit the scholars to do ijtihad in the furu', which is common and it is normally accepted. But they don't normally permit people to do ijtihad in the usul. That is unusual. But for Sheikh al-Akbar, he says, في مذهبنا الاجتهاد في الأصول كما هو في الفروع لا فرق. لا فرق. It is permissible to do ijtihad in the usul as much as it is permissible to do ijtihad in the furu', no difference whatsoever. And what are the usul? The usul pertains to aqidah, the very basic foundational setting of the religion itself. What is God? What is the nature of God? What is prophecy? Who are the prophets? What are the nature of the prophets? It pertains to the foundations of the religion itself. And when one does ijtihad in either the usul or the furu', one is rewarded whether you get it right or wrong. You are rewarded whether you get it right or wrong. And furthermore, the whole point of ijtihad is that the mujtahid who reaches his conclusion by way of ijtihad, his way of worship is now protected. It now becomes sacrosanct. You may not go against it, even though you can say your conclusion is wrong, but you are permitted to practice your way of life. And so this is how Ibn Arabi deals with the sun worshippers that he came across and met in Anatolia. And we got into detail about what he said about the sun worshippers he met in the previous session. So ijtihad is one tool. A second tool is what? The verse from Surah Hadid 57 and the ayahs for 57, 27. وَرَهْبَانِيَةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا. Right? Rahbaniya, they invented it. Now, what is Rahbaniya? Rahbaniya is normally translated as Christian monasticism, which is correct. But for Ibn Arabi, it means so much more than that. When you combine it with وَرَهْبَانِيَةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا and monasticism, they invented it. That phrase now means the path of the sages, the path of the hukama. It is the path that permits you to invent spiritual practices under certain conditions. And this is what we talked about last time when he said there are some people who, so for example, one of the practices that are invented is making prostration to objects that aren't God. And when is that acceptable under certain circumstances? So, for example, in the Quran, it's very clear that there are circumstances when you're permitted to bow down to objects that aren't God. The most common example is when God commands the angels to bow down to Adam, who is not God, right? Alayhi salam. But because God commanded it, it's permissible. but they bow down to Adam, but they don't worship him either. But then you've got the other end of the extreme when you bow down to an idol, for example, not on God's command, and you're rebelling against the prophets and you're worshiping that idol. That's not permissible. But then he gives you a third example that no one's really thought about. And he said, but there's a possibility where you are bowing down to an object that's not God, but you're also not worshiping it. You're trying to do something called ta'aleem. You are venerating the object for God's sake, for many reasons. And that's called رهبانية ابتدعوها, right? وما كتبنا عليهم إلا ابتغاء رضوان الله. And this إلا is called استثناء. استثناء منقطعة and استثناء متصل. There's two variations. Refer back to the previous session for more details on what that means. But it means that they did not know what is the right path to God, so they invented a path while only trying to seek his rida, his ridwan, his pleasure. And so when they did that, God accepted that from them. So like when you bow down to pictures and images, or you venerate them in some other way, out of a desire to please God, according to your particular cultural, environmental circumstances, he accepts that. That now becomes a way of life, right? And now you've got to follow it. You've got to adhere to it, okay? This session picks up from that, right? So we'll start with, now we have covered in the previous sessions the previous prophetic laws that are come under the Muhammadan Sharia, right? But now, what about the laws that are invented by man, but they are not revealed by God? What about the religion that's invented by people, but it's not revealed by God? This is from the Usus al-Hikam, the beginning of Fasi Aqub, and begins with the religion is two, right? Al-dinu dinan, dinun 'inda Allah, right? So this is the first religion. The religion that is with God. He is the one who reveals this religion. وَعَنْ مَنْ عَرَفَهُ وَالْحَقُّ تَعَالَى. And it's the religion with the one who knows, right? The one who knows God. So first you've got the religion that's with God, then religion who knows God, because the one who knows God knows what God revealed. وَمَنْ عَرَفَهُ مَنْ عَرَفَهُ الْحَقُّ. And the one who knows God. Who is the one who knows God? The prophets. Who are the ones who know the prophets, who know God? They are the inheritor saints, the ones who inherit from the prophets, and they know the religion that's revealed by God because they know the prophets. Now, if you read this with a shadda, it's not man arafahu, it's man arafahu. The one whom, it's almost like whom God teaches, the one who God causes to know. So the religion with whom is with God, so the religion that's with God, and then the one he causes to know the religion, those are the prophets, and the one he causes to know the prophets themselves. So you can read that both ways. So that's one religion, the one with God and the prophets. What's the second religion? وَدِينٌ عَنْدَ الْخَلْقِ. The religion that's made by people. وَقَدْ اعتبره Allah. But Allah, he accepts it. That's the meaning of اعتبره. He gives expression to it. فالدين الذي عند الله هو الذي اصطفاه الله وأعطاه الرتبة العليا. So, but the one that's with God, he elevates it above the religion that's made by man, but it is the religion made by people is still acceptable. And this is the path of the hukama, the sages, because you've got what? You've got the messengers who bring the religions from God. After the messengers, you've got the prophets. And the prophets are the ones who bring the religions as well. Then you've got the inheritor saints who inherit from the prophets and the messengers. Then beyond them, you've still got a fourth category, and they are the sages. And the sages have their own place in Islam, who are non-prophets. This is their place. So what is the mechanism by which they are given permission to invent their own path? Rahbaniya, verse 57-27, is one mechanism, but there's a second one, comes from the hadith. And it is from Rasulullah. And this is the basis on which we do mawlids, by the way. من سن سنة حسنة فعمل أو عمل بها بعده كان له أجرها. So the one who invents a beautiful path, a beautiful custom, a beautiful sunnah, he gets his reward. وَمِثْلُ أَجُورِهِمْ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَنْ يَنْقُصَ مِنْ أَجُورِهِمْ شَيْئًا. Right? And the one who follows him, he gets the same reward. And the one who makes an evil custom, وَمَنْ سَنَّ سُنَّةً سَيِّئَةً, or a bad custom, and he does it, then عَلَيْهِ وزره, then he gets the burden of that custom. وَمِثْلُ أَوْزَارِهِمْ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَنْ يَنْقُصُوا مِنْ أَوْزَارِهِمْ شَيْئًا. And the one who follows him, they get the same burdens, right? So there is permission in the Sunnah to invent, to invent. But obviously, what a Muslim invents is different to what a non-Muslim invents, right? So, what is the second religion that's made by people? And what is the second path? What is this non-prophetic path? It's called the nawamis, the laws. So you've got the sharia, which is revealed by the prophets. Then you've got the namus, the nawamis that is made by the sages. So let's get into it. Right. So I've taken like a small selection. This is from chapter 66. It is an extraordinary chapter, right? So this is just a small snippet. We'll actually get more into chapter 66 in the next session next week from the Futuhat al-Makkiyah. So, but the translation for the English version of this is actually in William Chick's book, Imaginal Worlds. So he says, فحد الاسم الرب لهم الحدود. Right? He's now talking about the divine name, the Lord. Right? The Lord, Al-Rabb, is responsible for doing islah, right? For making sure that the cosmos there is islah in the cosmos, that the cosmos is rectified, it is fixed, and it is made wholesome. ووضع لهم المراسم لإصلاح المملكة وليبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا وجعل الله ذلك على قسمين. Right? So then what he says is that the divine name, the Lord, establishes the laws that are to be used in the cosmos in order to make sure that the cosmos is not corrupted, because the opposite of islah is fasid, right? The opposite of islah is fasid, corrupted. So to make sure that the cosmos is healthy and wholesome. So there's two kinds of laws he reveals. قسم يسمى سياسة حكمية. How do you translate سياسة حكمية? It's like siyasa means politics, right? But it's a bit more than politics. It is the rule of law that is created by wisdom, by the people of wisdom, right? Because from siyasa, you also get yosus, which is to drive an animal to a certain place. It's the law you use to herd people in the right direction. ألقاها في فطر نفوس الأكابر من الناس. So it is an inspiration, right, that God casts into the nature, the innate nature of what? The mighty souls amongst people. Who are the nufus al-akabir? The hukama. فَحَدُّ حُدُودًا. So then they establish what are called the hudud, the limits. You could also translate that as the penalties. They establish the penalties so that people undertake the right course of action and don't go to excess. ووضعوا النواميس بقوة وجدوها في نفوسهم. And then they establish the man-made laws due to a power they find in their own souls. And they establish it where? In في كل مدينة وجهة وإقليم. They establish it in every city, in every direction, and in every climate. بحسب ما يقتضيه مزاج تلك الناحية وطباعهم, according to what the constitution of those places and their natures require. Mizaj is the requirement of their particular nature, because the particular nature of people in China is different to what is required in India, which is different to what is required in Europe, which is different to what is required in the Arab lands, and so on and so forth. So that they use their wisdom to establish the law that is needed in each place. لعلمهم بما تعطيه الحكمة, due to their knowledge of what wisdom requires. فانحفظت, but thereby they preserve بذلك أموال الناس ودماؤهم وأهلهم وأرحامهم وأنسابهم. Thereby, they preserve for the people their what? Their wealth, their lives, their blood, and their families, and وأرحامهم, and also their families, but also it's to do more with their lineage, right? When Sabhum is their genealogy, their lineage. وأهلهم is their family. وأرحامهم is also, I think, another word just for family, actually, right? Who wants to tell me what this is? دماءهم وأهلهم وأرحامهم وأنسابهم. What is that? What's he talking about? And أموال. What is this? He is talking about what? The maqasid al-sharia. Have you ever heard of this word, maqasid? So this is very important in usul al-fiqh, because usul al-fiqh talks about, especially with regard to maqasid al-sharia, what are the goals of the sharia. And the goal of the sharia is to preserve people's lives, it is to preserve people's wealth, it is to preserve their families and their lineages. وسموها نواميس ومعناها أسباب الخير. And so they call the نواميس, which means the cause of goodness. لأن الناموس في العرف الاصطلاحي هو الذي يأتي بالخير والجاسوس يستعمل في الشر. So, right, it means the cause of goodness. Any law I establish that brings about goodness in society, that's a namus that God accepts. فهذه هي نواميس الحكمية. These are the laws of the sages. التي وضعتها العقلاء. Who are the عقلاء? They are called the rational men. But that's not a great translation. The عقلاء are the men who use their intellects to give order to society, but also are still spiritually connected to God. But they just don't have wahi. They're not connected to the prophetic realities, but they're still spiritual. These are the uqala. They use their intellects and their spiritual knowledge to bring about order to the cosmos. And ilham min Allah. And they get that by way of inspiration from God, from where they don't perceive. This is interesting. This is really interesting. That's how you know they're non-prophets. They don't know where this spiritual inspiration is coming from, but they're getting it. Right? They do that for the sake of establishing order and wholesomeness of the cosmos, right? And for making sure everything is tied together. So this is extraordinary, right? Like the 42 laws of Maat in ancient Egypt, exactly Sahara. And I was just going to say, so you've got the ancient Egyptians, you've got Confucius, you've got Solon from the Greeks, he's a lawmaker. But by extension, you've also got Plato and Socrates. You've got many others. This is what they do, right? They use their intellect. They're not prophets, but they use their intellects to ensure the society is established and that there's no corruption in the cosmos. في مواضع لم يكن عندهم شرع الله منزل, in places where they don't have a revealed law. ولا علم لواضع هذه النواميس بأن هذه الأمور مقربة إلى الله. And so the one who's establishing these laws, he has no idea that what he is doing is creating a situation where these affairs will bring you closer to God. Well, and he has no idea that these things bring closer to God. He has no idea. ولا تورث جنة. He has no idea that these things are a cause for inheriting paradise or going to hell. ولا شيء من أسباب الآخرة, or for being a cause for things that will happen in the akhirah. He doesn't know that. ولا علموا أن ثم آخرة. He doesn't even know that there is an akhirah. Because anyone who knows there's an akhirah, it's because a prophet told you that there's an akhirah. Otherwise, how would you know anything about the akhirah? It's because the prophet told you. وبعثا, and then a resurrection, محسوس, a physical resurrection, بعد الموت, في أجسام طبيعية, and that there will be a physical resurrection in your actual bodies after death. Who's going to tell you that except a prophet? ودارا فيها أكل وشرب ولباس ونكاح وفرح, and that there will be abodes in which there will be drinks and dress and marriage and happiness, and marriage as well. ودارا, and there's another abode in which there is punishment and pain. فإن وجود ذلك ممكن, because the existence of these kinds of places is a possibility, but it's not a guarantee intellectually. It only becomes a guarantee when a prophet tells you. وعدمه ممكن, like it could be there, it could not be there, intellectually speaking. ولا دليل لهم في ترجيح أحد الممكنين. Yes, ممكنين. بل رهبانية ابتدعوها, right? فلهذا كان مبني نواميسهم ومصالحهم على إبقاء الصلاح في هذه الدار, or في هذا الدار, I think. So this is why they build their laws, for the sake of establishing order in the cosmos and wholesomeness, so that إبقاء الصلاح, so that this wholesomeness may remain in this world. So it's for the sake of making sure that this world remains standing. They're the ones who preserve this world, right? So these sages, they are the rational thinkers. Now, we don't have time to get into this, so I'm going to skip this. But Ibn Arabi owes this understanding of Namus to a whole intellectual genealogy that goes way back before him. He's not the first to invent this, right? It actually goes back to Farabi in some ways, right? And to the writings of the previous philosophical translation movement in the 8th and 9th centuries, right? But what we can say very briefly is that Ibn Arabi inherits from this movement the meaning of the word namus and what it brings in terms of its purpose. What is the purpose of a namus? A namus promotes the acquisition of the virtues so that you can establish a society. It establishes penalties and punishments as a deterrent to vice so that you don't do wrong things. It encourages financial exchange and commerce and fair commerce. And it establishes justice through politics. That is the purpose of a namus. So now we'll get more into what a namus is, where it comes from, right? So he's in this chapter 73, in his answer to Tirmidhi's questionnaire, 150 questions, I think. In this question, he's talking about what is ibadah. Is it natural, innate, or is it artificial? So he says, look, the ibadah that you have to make that's more artificial is divided into two kinds. So there's a نوع يكون بدليل أنه من Allah. There is a form of worship that brings with it a proof that's from God, which is the law of the prophets, right? But then there's another kind of form of worship. There's no proof that it comes from God. What is that? It is the namus al-wad'i. It is the man-made law الذي تقتضيه الحكمة, that necessitates wisdom. يلقيه الله تعالى من اسمه الباطن الحكيم. God casts it into the hearts of the sages of the ages by the divine name al-batin al-hakim. What's the divine name al-batin al-hakim? The inward, the wise. So when a sage obtains his wisdom that is cast into his heart, the sage of that age, no matter where he's from, Mesopotamia, Greece, Egypt, no matter where he's from, he gets that wisdom from the divine name, the inward, the wise, al-batin al-hakim, al-batin al-hakim. من حيث لا يشعرون, but in such a way he doesn't know where it came from. He just knows that he finds his wisdom in his soul. But where did it come from? He has no idea. ويضيفون ذلك اللقاء إلى نظرهم. Then they add that spiritual casting to their intellectual consideration. إلى نظرهم. لا يعلمون أنه من عند الله على تعين. They don't know that it came from God by way of specification. God specified this wisdom for them, but they don't know that. لكنهم يرون أن الأصل من عند الله. But they see that the principle came from God. فيشرعونه لمتبعيهم من أهل زمانهم. And so they legislated as a law for their followers, for the people of their time. إذ لم يكن فيهم نبي مدلول على النبوة. They do this in an age when there's no proof that there's a prophet and there's no prophet with them. So because there's no prophet to guide them to the right path, they have to invent their own path. And they do that through the wisdom that God casts into their hearts. فإنهم قاموا بحدود ذلك الناموس. So if they establish the boundaries and the penalties set by that law, in other words, if they follow their own law, their own namus, وقفوا عنده ورعوها, and they protect it and they stand by it. جزاهم الله على ذلك بحسب ما عملوه به في الدنيا والآخرة. You see, God rewards them for what they do when they work in their law. عملوه, that means they put their law into practice. He rewards them for it in this world and the next. جزاء الشرع المقرر المدلول عليه, right? It is the reward that comes from the law, the established law. In other words, it's confirmed by the Sharia, according to which it says فَمَا رَعَوْهَا حَقَّ رِعَايَتِهَا, which is 57:27. It's the same Rahbaniyya verse. فَمَا رَعَوْهَا حَقَّ رِعَايَتِهَا. And so they did not observe its right with regards to what they invented of Rahbaniyya. فيما ابتدعوه من الرهبانية, right? So it's not a negation. He means they only observed its right for God's sake, to seek His pleasure, and also comes from the hadith. وَمَنْ سَنَّ سُنَّةً حَسَنَةً فَلَهُ أَجْرُهَا excuse me, أجرها وأجر من عمل بها ومن سن سنة سيئة فعليه وزرها ووزر من عمل بها. And the one who invents a good and beautiful custom, he gets its reward. And the one who invents an evil custom, he gets its burden. وإن الله مصدق قول واضع الناموس الحكمي كما هو مصدق واضع الناموس الشرعي الحكمي. Because they're both nawamis, by the way. You could also see it that way. So God confirms as truthful the one who uses the namus that's made by wisdom, just as he confirms as truthful the revealed law that's given by the prophets. So that's called a namus al-hukmi, because the prophet has the right to establish rulings. So that's called a namus al-hukmi, whereas the other one is namus al-hikmi, the one established by the sages. فأما جزاؤه في الدنيا, right? So he rewards him for it in this world. فلا شك. So as for the reward in this world, there's no doubt that there's a reward for it in this world, and it's not hidden from anyone. ولا خفى بوقوع المصلحة. No, it's not hidden how useful it is, right? The beneficial. What is the beneficial interest of the people for establishing this law? They benefit from it in this way. ووجدها في الأهل والمال والعدد. They find its benefit in their families and their wealth and their honor, their lineage, because it preserves wealth, it preserves their families, it preserves their lives, it preserves their honor. وأما الآخرة فعلى هذا المجرى. And so it works in the same way with regard to the next world. وإن لم يتعرض إليه صاحب الناموس الحكمي. So even if he never came across what the reward is for these laws in the next world, right? كما أنه في الناموس الحكم لله أن في الآخرة لنا. Just as it is said in the namus of the rulings, of the divine rulings, which is the prophetic shariah, the prophetic laws. And what do they say? That in the next world we shall have what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what has never occurred to the hearts of any mortal being, which is paradise. ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر. Right? So he's making a one-to-one comparison, which is really interesting. I've never seen paradise, so I don't know what to expect. But the person who goes there, he'll see it when it is his time. It's the same thing for the sage who invents laws. He doesn't know what to expect when he dies, but he'll find out when he dies. Right? If that doesn't make sense, let me know, because it should be like analogous to each other. ويحصل لنا من غير تقدم علما به. And there's no prior knowledge of it for us, right? كذلك الحاصل في الآخرة جزاء لعمل الناموس الذي اقتضته الحكمة عند من ابتدعه للمصلحة. Just as he will obtain the reward for that in the next life when he works through his namus, which necessitates wisdom, the law that's created for the sake of wisdom, for the one who invents it for the sake of establishing the maslahah of all people, right? فإن قال في ناموسه, if he's now he goes into an interesting angle. He gives you now a second angle. فإن قال, if he says in his law قال الله, if he says in his namus God says. Now that's weird, right? A prophet will tell you what God says because God reveals to him what God says. But the creator, the inventor of a namus, the man-made law, he's not in connection with divine revelation. So how would he know what God says? he might get spiritual inspiration, but spiritual ilham and other things. You'll find out in a little bit. But the spiritual inspiration that we're talking about, it's not really revelation. So he's kind of guessing what God says, right? So he says, now look, the one who says in his namus, God says, so he's making a claim on God's behalf. ويكون ممن قد علم أنه مظهر, but he knows that he is a madhar for God's himself, I guess, or for God's inspiration. What's a madhar? He is a locus of manifestation. He is the place from which God's attributes, perhaps, or God's wisdom manifests. If he knows that, so this is a very spiritual person who has a namus, but he's not a prophet, right? and he knows that when لا موجود على حقيقة إلا الله, and there's nothing in existence except God, or if you like, there's no existence being in reality except God. صدق, right? صدق وعفى الله عنه. God pardons him for making a claim when he's not a prophet, and he confirms what he says. صدقه وعفى الله عنه. But وإن كان من أهل الحجاب عن هذا العلم, but if he's one of these people who is not spiritual and he's hidden from this knowledge, أهل الحجاب, he's one of the people of the veils. So that means the first person has kashf. Kashf is possible for a sage. Even if he doesn't have wahi, he can have kashf. But if there's another person who knows this kind of thing happens, but he doesn't have kashf, and he says the same thing, فأمره إلى الله, the decision goes back to God. He could get into trouble. وهو بحسب قصده في ذلك, and he'll be judged according to his intention. What was his intention? فإنه قد يقصد الرئاسة وتكون المصلحة في حكم التبع. He might have intended to say that so that he could be a leader and gain followers, only thinking about the beneficial interest of people as a secondary issue. That's bad. وقد يقصد, but also it could also be that هو قد يقصد المصلحة. He might have truly intended the beneficial interest of the people, intended their مصلحة, وتكون الرئاسة طبعا, and he only intended leadership as a secondary issue. In other words, he was thinking about the maslahah of people and not about being a leader. So he's excused if he does that. وهذا الكلام لا يتصور إلا مع عدم الشرع المقرر بدليل في تلك الجماعة وذلك المكان الخاصة. But these words, everything we're talking about, it doesn't apply to when an actual prophet comes. You can't conceptualize, you can't think about these words. These words are not conceivable except when a prophetic law is absent, right? So this happens when prophets are absent. So briefly, so we are talking about the establishment of laws to preserve people's wealth and their lives and their lineage, right? And their families. So these are governmental laws. And so what is the takeaway? Governmental laws, the creation of them, even though they don't have an overtly spiritual import, can still lead to salvation, right? And it's to do with the preservation of lives, family, wealth, and honor. And when the followers of that law adhere to its limits, God rewards them for it in this life and the next, right? And that includes spiritually talented people who are not prophets and speak on God's behalf when they're not intending to say that for the sake of gaining followers and for the sake of becoming a leader for some worldly reason, right? And so Abdul Ghani Nabusi lists different kinds of people like Plato, Aristotle. Galen's a bit interesting because he's a physician, right? But maybe I can talk about that more in the chat room. And so Abdul Ghani Nabusi says they have laws and canons they invented. Plato and Aristotle didn't really invent laws and canons, right? But it's just nice to see that he's willing to entertain that Plato and Aristotle could have been these kinds of people, right? So that leads us into the kinds of inspirations that these sages can be given. One of them is the angelic touch from chapter 160 of the Futuhat. Okay, so he says, ومن هذا الباب السياسة الحكمية لمصالح العالم. Political wisdom is established for the sake of the beneficial interest of the cosmos. التي لم يأتي بها شرعا, but which was not revealed by a prophetic law. And فقد الأنبياء, when the prophets are lost. So a lot of this discussion goes back to what's called the زمان الفترات, the period of the prophetic absence. عليهم السلام. وأزمنة الفترات, that's what it is. تنزل بها الملائكة الإلهام. The angels of inspiration come down and bring this wisdom. واللمات, الملائكة الإلهام واللمات, and they bring it على قلوب العقلاء, الزمان وحكماء الوقت. They bring it upon the hearts of the rational giants and the sages of the era, the sage of the age. There's the malaika of ilham, the angels of inspiration, and malaika al-lammat. What's lamma? Lamma is a touch. So isn't that a really interesting way of expressing this angelic inspiration? Because one version of that is an inspiration that's given to you by an angel. But the second way of thinking about it is there could be like a touch, an angel touches you, and suddenly you're given this wisdom, which just reminds me of Plato's concept of divine madness, right? And that makes me think that there's another way to understand the Quranic verses that say, وهو شاعر مجنون, he is a mad poet, right? And then the Quran says, no, Rasul, he's not شاعر مجنون, he's not a mad poet. There's two ways to understand that. The Quraysh intended that as an insult to Rasulullah, to the Prophet Muhammad. But there's also a second layer in which the Quran is saying there's different orders of angelic revelation. The angelic revelation that was given to Muhammad was Gabrielic, it's through Jibreel. There's a second order, which is an angelic touch, right? A divine touch that causes madness. That's not the order of revelation of the Quran, but it could be the order of revelation given to other sages. That's just a thought from my own self. فَيَلْقُونَهَا فِي أَفْكَارِهِمْ. So this angel casts this divine inspiration into their thinking, into their thoughts. لَا عَلَى أَسْرَارِهِمْ, not into their innermost secret, to their innermost self. So then these sages فَيَضَعُونَهَا وَيَحْمِلُونَ عَلى النَّاسِ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُلُوكِ. So then these sages, when they have this angelic inspiration that comes from the angels, so it's actually a law that comes from an angel. The angel inspires them with this law, then the sage establishes that law, and then they ensure that people follow the law, even kings. وَالْمُلُوكِ, even kings. وَمَا فِيهِ شَيْءٌ مِنَ الشِّرْكِ. There's nothing in it that has shirk in it. There's nothing in it that has associationism. Sahr, their secrets, their asrar, it's like your innermost batin. It is your batin, right? It's a technical term. Maybe I can find a better way of explaining it in the chat room. But it's what's inside yourself, right? Because the asrar, it's called a secret because that's where the divine secrets, the divine inspiration goes. Like it's not something I can think of. I can't think about it. I just know it's right when an angel casts it into that person. That's called a sir. That is their asrar. Okay. فهذه هي الرسالة الملكية. This is the angelic messengership التي فيها مصالح العالم في الدنيا, which contains in it the beneficial interest of the cosmos in this world. وهي البدعة الحسنة. This is the good bid'ah, because our law permits the good bid'ah. So people assume that if I say bid'ah, it means that we are talking about the bad bid'ah, and that no bid'ah is permitted whatsoever. No, the good, the beautiful bid'ah is permitted. It's the bad bid'ah that's not permitted. التي أثنى الله على من راها حق رعايتها ابتغاء رضوان الله. This is the beautiful invention, البدعة. Let's call it innovation. This is the beautiful innovation which God praises in the verse that talks about when they observe its right, seeking God's pleasure in it. When they observe the rights of that law they invented, right? Okay. The other way of conceptualizing non-prophetic religions is through the makarim al-akhlaq, right? What is the makarim al-akhlaq? It's the acquisition of the noble character traits. It's when you acquire noble virtues, the good character traits, like being forbearing, being generous, being courageous. That is a law in itself. That's a namus in itself. So the Shaykh al-Akbar says, الشريعة هي السنة الظاهرة التي جاءت بها الرسول عن أمر الله والسنن التي ابتدعت على طريق القربة إلى الله كقوله تعالى ورهبانية ابتدعوها. Right? So the Sharia, it's the outward sunnah, the outward customs that the prophets brought by God's command, and it's the customs that have been invented as a way of bringing you closer to God, according to his saying, and sagehood, they invented it. And according to the word of Rasulullah, man sunnah hasna, the one who invents a good and beautiful custom, فَجَازَ لَنَا, so it's permitted to us, ابتداع ما هو حسن, it is permitted to us to invent what is beautiful. وجعل فيه الأجر لمن ابتدعه, and we are given the reward. The one who invents it, he gets its reward. وَلِمَنْ عَمَلْ بِهَا, and the one who practices it afterwards. وأخبر أن العبد لله بما يعطيه نظره إذا لم يكن على شرع من الله معين. Right? And so, and he has informed us that the servant who works for God's sake alone, right, according to what God has given his intellectual consideration, what he is able to think about in terms of creating a path that pleases him, right? If he is not upon a prophetic law from God, أنه يحشر أمة وحده, he is resurrected as a whole nation by himself, بغير إمام يتبعه, without a leader to follow. So he gets his own special resurrection on the day of judgment. فجعله خيرا والحقه بالأخيار. So he made this law a good, and it's also a good for those who come after him. كما قال في إبراهيم عليه السلام إن إبراهيم كان أمة قانتا لله تعالى وذلك قبل أن يوحى إليه. And this was before Ibrahim had revelation. He was a nation by himself. وقال عليه السلام, or so Rasulullah, he said, بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. I was sent to perfect the noble character traits, which are the good character traits, like courage and generosity and forbearance and yeah. فمن كان على مكارم الأخلاق, so the one who practices the acquisition of good character traits, هو على شرع من ربه, he is upon, the one who practices this acquisition of good character traits, he is upon a law from his Lord. وإن لم يعلم ذلك, even if he doesn't know it. So he is practicing a sharia, even if he doesn't know it, he's doing it. وسماه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خيرا, he called it a good in the hadith with talking about Hakim bin Hizam, right? Who in the Jahiliyyah, even before Islam, he used to free slaves, he used to give charity, and he used to connect people, al-raham, he used to connect people together, he used to bring family together when they were angry with each other, for example. وَكَرَم, and he was generous, and these kinds of things. That's all a sharia. فقال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم, so right, so Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said to him, you became a Muslim, أسلمت على ما أسلفت من خير, you became a Muslim based upon the good you used to do beforehand. And so فسماه, so he called it a khair, he called it a goodness. That is a namus. Khair, namus means khair, that's what it means. وجزاه الله به, and so God rewarded him for it, right? So he says, فالشريعة إن لم تفهم هكذا, if you don't get it, the Sharia is like this. It's about establishing goodness. وإلا, and if you don't, then you've not understood the Sharia. Invention, right? This is the tool that's used by the sages to create their own laws that's permitted to them by God. So Sheikh Al-Akbar says regarding the verse on Rahbaniyah, so what does that mean, that verse? It means, so every act of worship they created was what the real legislate for them. You see, every act of worship they invented, that is God making it lawful for them. That is his law for them, because God told them, you may invent these acts of worship. So then the acts they invent, that's God's law. And then the Sheikh Al-Akbar says in a poem in the Diwan, it's longer, but I just gave you a small snippet. He says, the Shara, right? The Shara is two. The Shara of the messengers and the Shara of the sages. And all of it is protected, mar'iyya, for whoever understands. It's protected by the divinity, for God has confirmed it. And mar'iyya also means green pastures, right? So he's also playing on the words. And then in the Naqsh al-Fusus, he says, Wal dinu dinan, right? The religion is true religion, just like in Fasi Yaqub. Dinun ma'murun bihi, a religion that is commanded. Which is what the prophets, the messengers brought. وَدِينٌ مُعْتَبَرٌ, and a religion that is acknowledged by God. So God didn't reveal it, but he acknowledges it. وَهُوَ الْإِبْتِدَاء, it is the religion of invention. الَّذِي فِيهِ تَعْظِيمُ الْحَقِّ, which contains in it glorifying God and venerating him. We talked about veneration, the way the sun worshippers venerated God, the way Greek Orthodox Christians venerate their icons, and so on and so forth. فمن راه حق رعايته ابتغاء رضوان الله فقد أفلح. So the one who adheres to this law and observes the law, giving it its due right, seeking God's pleasure, he is saved. Does that make sense? Okay. Good. We're going to take a small break in a little bit, but we're almost done with the presentation, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah, we are getting there. So he talks about the same thing here, but really there's no need to get into it. I'm just going to skip it. Okay. So then we come to chapter 369. It talks about the universality of the Nawamis. And so he says, وما من طائفة إلا وهي تحت ناموس شرعيا حكميا أو وضعا حكميا. Right? There's no sect from any religion, except this sect from any religion comes under a namus that comes from the prophets, which is shari'an, hukmi, or it comes from the sages, which is wada'an hikmi. فلا تخلو أمة من مخالفة تقع منها لناموسها كان ما كان. So there's no escaping the fact that any community is exposed to the possibility of disobeying their law, of contravening their own namus, whatever that is. Everyone can do it. Because it can be a namus that's invented by man and God acknowledges it, or it can be a namus that's revealed by the prophets. فلا ينفك? No, I think it's ينفك. فلا ينفك صاحب هذه المخالفة من مراقبة العفو. So therefore, the person who comes from this particular law, he will always have to watch himself, muraqabah, right? Watching out for God's pardon if he does disobey this law, right? Or watching out for possible punishment. المؤاخذة على ما قرره عليه واضع الناموسي, according to what the inventor of that law decides the punishment to be. فقد عمت النواميس جميع الأمم. So the nawamis, the laws, encompass all the communities, all the nations, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, they encompass them all. وهو قوله تعالى, this is God's word, وإن من أمة إلا خلى فيها نذير. Every single community has a warner that came to it. You see, the warner could be a sage and the warner could be a prophet. فهو إما نذير بأمر الله وإرادته. So this could be a warner by God's command and his will. Or it could be أو نذير بإرادة الله فقط. Or it's just a warner by God's will. What does this mean? He'll explain now what he means by that. So obviously, if he's a nadhir, a warner by God's command, he's a prophet. Well, who's the one who is only a warner by God's will? He says, لا بوحي نزل عليه يعلم به أنه من عند الله. Right? Not the second one. He doesn't have revelation telling him that this warning came from God. فأمر الله إنما متعلقه عين إيجاد. So then God's command is only connected to what? The creation. عين إيجاد إنذاره فيه. to the creation of the warning inside the warner himself. فقيل لإنذاره, right? So then he says, so God says to the warning, be, كون. So God creates the warning in في هذا العبد, in that servant, فكان. Then it comes to exist. فوجد الإنذار في نفسه. So he finds the warning in himself. ولم يدري من أين جاء. He has no idea where this warning comes, but he feels in his soul he has to give this warning. Who is an example who he's talking about? In our literature, what's called in the Uthologia of Aristotle, the theology of Aristotle, which is really the book of Plotinus, the Enneads, he talks about Empedocles, who used to come down from the mountains, and he would shout at people, telling them to return to God, return to the world you used to come from, right? That is an example from Empedocles, who was a non-prophet. And I also like to think about people like, if you've ever heard about this from Greta Thunberg, if you've heard about her, right? When she was very young, much younger than she is now, her climate activism came about as a result of a deep depression she felt in herself, because she could see that the world is going in a direction that is self-destructive. I like to think of that as an example. That depression in her was the warning God created in her so that she could tell people about it and warn them about it. This is obviously not medical advice. People who have depression, you need to speak to an actual medical practitioner, not me. I'm just giving you an example of how we can think about these things, right? That's how I see it. فهذا الفرق بين الشرع الإلهي الذي جاءت به الرسل من عند الله وبين ما وضعته حكم العصار لأتباعها لمصالحهم. So this is the difference between the prophets and the sages, right? So فمن وفى بحق ناموسه واحترمه ووقف عند حده ابتغاء رضوان الله فقد أحسن في عمله. So the one who is faithful to his law and the right that his law deserves and respects it and reveres it, واحترمه, and he halts, he stops himself at its hudud, at its limits, right? Like when it says don't do this, so he stops and doesn't do the wrong things, seeking God's pleasure, then فقد أحسن في عمله, he has made his actions beautiful. And if he has made his actions beautiful, he comes under the hadith of ihsan. وأن الله لا يضيع أجر من أحسن عملا, and God will never cause the reward of one who does beautiful works to be lost. This is in the Quran. The one who does beautiful works, God will not cause his reward to be lost. That's in the Quran. What is ihsan? What is doing beautiful works? وإحسانه أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه. And ihsan is to worship God as if you see him. أو تعلم أنه يراك, or to know that he sees you. فهذا هو الحد الضابط للإحسان في العمل. So this is the governing principle with regard to ihsan, doing ihsan in your works. وما عدا هذا فهو سوء عمله, and the one who does the opposite of that, that's called bad works. He's doing evil works. He is doing evil works when he's not seeking God's pleasure and the action he is performing. فإن كان, now the Shaykh Al-Akbar is going to give you an exception. He's going to give you an exception to that. Who can give me a guess as to what that exception is? And it's something we've already talked about before, one of my favorite words. The exception to that is the one who does ijtihad. And you're going to see now what that means. So now Shaykh Al-Akbar says, but this person who's doing bad works, and so therefore it's not beautiful, if he's one of those whom God says, زُيِّنَ لَهُ سُوءُ عَمَلِهِ فَرَاهُ حَسَنًا. What does that mean? It means the bad work he did, it was made to appear to him, it appeared beautiful to him, so he saw, or actually, his bad work was decorated, was ornamented, so he saw it as beautiful. It's to take a bad thing, but it appears beautiful to you. So he says, if that's the case, if that's the person we're talking about, فَلَا يَخْلُو, so then it means he's one of two kinds of people. إما أن تكون رؤية سوء العمل حسنا بعد اجتهاد. يفي بما في وسع ذلك الشخص المجتهد فقد وفى الأمر حقه. So, if he's one of those who sees his bad work as something beautiful, but he sees it as beautiful after doing ijtihad, and he fulfilled what is the right of ijtihad as much as he can في وسع ذلك الشخص, as much as he can. That's what it means ijtihad. Then فقد وفى, then he has given and he has been faithful to the affair and given it its due right. So then what does that make him? That makes him هو صاحب عمل حسنا. That makes him the companion of a beautiful work. ويكون قونه سوء عملا يراه سوءا عين حكما المصيب للحق صاحب الأجرين. So the one who does that, he falls under the category of the hadith, the mujtahid. If he hits the mark, he gets 2 rewards, and if he misses the mark, which he obviously does in this case, he still gets يكون هذا المزين, the one المزين له بهذه الصفة صاحب الأجر الواحد. He still gets 1 reward when he got it wrong, right? وإن لم يكن عن استيفاء اجتهاد, but if he did not do ijtihad and he did not give ijtihad its due right بقدر الوسع, and as he did not give it its due right as much as he could, وراه حسنا, but he sees his work as being beautiful من غير اجتهاد فهو في المشيئة إلا, then it's not good. Then he goes to the will of God. فلا يدري بما ختم له, that he does not know how his affair will end, will be sealed. ولماذا يؤول أمره في مدة إقامة الحدود. I think it's not the amount, I think it's literally to what? He does not know what his affair will go to when it's time for punishment, when it's time for the penalty. مدة إقامة الحدود, when it's time for the penalty. في الدنيا والآخرة, in this world and the next. فإنه sorry, I can't see the text because of this thing. 1 second. Yes, okay. فإنه, for he's one of those ممن أسرف على نفسه. He's one of those who has gone to excess against himself. Now, there's still a chance for him to be saved. فإن قنط من رحمة الله فما وفاء الأمر حقه وساء ظنا بربه والرب عند الظن عبده به. If he's one of those who despairs of God's mercy, then he's not one of those who is giving the affair its due. And he has thought badly of his Lord, because God says in the Hadith Qudsi, I am in the opinion of my servant, so let him think good of me. So this is the worst thing you can do, is to despair of God's mercy. So when he talks about the verse, يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسكم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله, don't despair of the mercy of God. Sheikh Al-Akbar says this is فعل الأمر. He says it's a command. It has like a fiqhi consequence. God commands you to not despair of him no matter what you've done. So don't do it. وقد نهى الله المسرف على نفسه عن القنوت. And God has commanded the person who is a musrif, who's gone to excess, who's wronged himself, he has commanded himself not to despair. Right? Now, the Shaykh Al-Akbar says, this whole affair goes back to iman and kufr. وأما الإيمان فهو أمر عام. This affair of faith is universal. What does that mean? وكذلك الكفر. Likewise كفر الذي هو ضده. What does that mean? فإن الله قد سمى مؤمنا من آمن بالحق وسمى مؤمنا من آمن بالباطل. The Quran calls both kinds of people believers. Those who believe in God and his messengers, they're called mu'min. And those who believe in Satan and Shaitan and in Taghut, he calls them believers, because they're believers in the Taghut, and then there's believers in the Prophet, but they're all believers. And he says, وَسَمَا كَافِرًا مَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِاللَّهِ, and he calls the kafir the one who disbelieves in God. وَسَمَا كَافِرًا مَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوت, the one who does takfir of the Taghut, he's also a kafir like us. So we are kuffar in the Taghut. So everyone does iman, everyone does kufr in something. And he says, and then he makes it clear. وَبَيَّنَ مَالَ. So then he makes clear what is the end. هؤلاء وهؤلاء. What is the end of these and those. وَلَطَرِيقُهُ التي جاءت ببيانها أيده بالدلالات على صحته أنه من عند الله المرجوي في كل ملة ونحلة وعند كل طائفة. And so he has clarified what the road is with signs that show you what these roads lead to, right? That shows you the correctness, that it is from God, the one who is hoped for by every sect, by every creed, by every group. والأعمال الصالحة رأسها الإيمان. And I guess the head of good works is faith. فهي تابعة له. كان الإيمان بما كان, because all the good works fall after what your faith is, whatever your religion is. وما في الأمور الوجودية أغمض من هذه المسألة. There's nothing more confusing in existence than this question. لأن الله قرن العمل السيء بالتزيين, because God has connected your work, your bad work, or this person's bad work, with it being adorned, decorated for him. حتى يراه العامل حسنا, until the worker sees his bad work as something beautiful. فيتخذه صالح عمل, so he thinks he's doing a good work. You see, the majority of people from every single religion and sect in the entire world, they think what they're doing is right. So there will be people amongst them for whom their action appears to be beautiful, even if it's not correct with God. وعلى الله قصد السبيل. فجاء بالألف اللام. This is called ألف لام تعريف for سبيل, right? So that means to God returns all the roads. للشمول في السبل. Every single road goes back to him. That's called ألف لام تعريف. فإنها كلها سبلا, because they're all roads. يراها من جاهد في الله. The one who struggles in God, he sees all the roads. فأبان له ذلك, then becomes clear to him, right? ذلك الجهاد السبل الإلهية. These are the divine ways of jihad, the one struggles in. فسلك منها الأسد. So it is actually it should be al-asadu, I think. So the lion is the one who crosses all these paths, right? And في نفسه, and he excuses وعذر الخلق فيما هم عليه من السبل, and so he excuses the creation, whichever path they're on, right or wrong, he excuses every single one of them, because all the paths go back to God. He excuses every one of them. وانفرد بالله فهو على نور من الله, and so he stands alone because he's upon a light from God. And so this is what the Shaykh al-Akbar also says. The people of Kashf, the high saints, the folk of unveiling, Ahlul Kashf, have been given an all-inclusive overview of all the positions, the tenets, the sects, and the doctrines concerning God. They are not ignorant of any of these. Adherents follow tenets, sects conform to specific laws, namus khas, and doctrines are held concerning God or something in the engendered universe. Some of these contradict others, some disagree, and some are similar. In every case, the companions of unveiling know from where the doctrine, the sect, or the creed is taken, and they ascribe it to its place. They offer an excuse for everyone who holds it and do not declare him in error. I would like to take a 2-minute break, please, and then we'll finish this presentation off with this last section, which is to do with the degrees, the degrees of the al-fatra. So I'm just going to pause the recording, and we'll take a 2-minute break, please. Thank you very much, and we are back. Okay, let's finish this, inshallah, quickly. So that takes us to the degrees of the kinds of categories, spiritual categories that exist for the Ahlul al-Fatra, right? So Sheikh al-Akbar says that there are like maybe about 5 degrees for the people of the Fatra. What is the Fatra? The Fatra is the period of prophetic absence. I think there's more than one example, but the main example that we know of and speak of is the period between the time of who? Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam and Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In between that period, there were no prophets. So because there was an absence of prophets in that period, sorry, excuse me 1 second, apologies. Yeah, I apologize for that. So, because there are no prophets, there were people who tried to seek out the truth and tried to connect to God and find God themselves. So these are the 5 kinds of people who did that, right? So I'm just gonna read the notes, inshallah. Okay. So the first degree is based on someone who says, La ilaha illallah, so he finds God, but he finds it based on his own self. What does that mean? He is the one who says, La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, but based on God's own tajalli to his own self, based on God's revelation or self-disclosure to his self. And from that vision, he sees that his existence must have come from someone else. So this internal vision is called the unity of the essence, Tawheed al-Dhati. This is the first kind. The second kind of spiritual rational seeker in that period is someone who says he discovers there's no God but God, La ilaha illallah, but based on his own attribute, his own na'at. What is his attribute? Knowledge. He is the one who unifies God based on his knowledge. For his attribute is knowledge of God's unity, his tawheed, and his oneness, his ahadiyya, his uniqueness. So he knows from his own knowledge. This is kind of like a cognitive tawheed, where he rationally infers that there has to be an ultimate maker who is transcendent and he's unique. So the first kind is based on a vision. The second kind is based on a rational inference. And the third degree, he says, La ilaha illallah, based on his Lord. And so he says, he is the one who sees that God is the very same thing as wujud and not some other matter. So he sees that God is wujud itself. So God, the real al-haq, manifests himself to himself through the mumkinat, the possibilities, right? Whatever our wujud is, it belongs to God. He sees that they derive their wujud from God's wujud. This is the third kind of spiritual seeker. The fourth kind is the one who says La ilaha illallah, but based on his Lord's attribute. He sees that the real al-haq subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the point of view of his ahadiyya, his uniqueness, in essence, is not the one called God or the Lord, because God does not accept the addition. So the divine essence is one and singular in every respect. It does not accept duality, especially in existence. So this spiritual speaker, this spiritual seeker, he sees that the object you worship, it's not God. You can call it your Lord, for example, right? But it's not God, because God, you can't actually reach him. He's ahad, right? So this is due to his attribute of being ahad. So it's the ahadiyya. So this is the fourth seeker. And the fifth seeker, he's the lowest one. He's the one who says La ilaha illallah, but it's based on the lower spiritual state. So he's the one who finds that when all the doors have been shut in his face from all directions, and he can't get what he wants, he returns to God by force. Then he says, there's no God but God. That's when he realizes, oh, the only one who can help me here is God. That's the fifth kind of seeker. Right? So we come to the final part, and this is to do with the maratib excuse me one second. Okay, so this is to do with the again, the different kinds of spiritual seekers you find in this period. So he talks about them. So he says, Ghada, the fatra is the period when there's no prophets. It's the period when there's no prophets. So when there's no prophet, you have to find God yourself. So when you try to find God yourself, you use your spiritual abilities if you have them, but mainly you use your intellect and your rational thought. Does that make sense? I mean, you can tell me. Otherwise, we'll leave it to the Q&A.
Yeah, it's better
So
like, for the Q&A because I want to understand the 5
better,
levels
okay.
more.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, خلاص, okay. So we'll come back to the 5 levels in the Q&A. Fine. Okay, thank you. Okay. So this is from chapter 10 of the Futuhat. So the Sheikh Al-Akbar says, وأما مرتبة العالم الذي بين عيسى عليه السلام ومحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم هم أهل الفترة فهم على مراتب مختلفة بحسب ما يتجلى لهم من الأسماء عن علم منهم بذلك وعن غير علم. So this is the period between the time of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, and the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so these are the different levels of people from which God shows himself to them from his divine names, some of them knowing that, some of them who don't know that. So who are these spiritual categories? So he says, فَمِنْهُمْ, amongst them, مِنْ وَحَّدَ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَجَلَّى لِقَلْبِهِ عِنْدَ فِكْرِهِ, is one whom God shows himself to his heart by way of his thought. وهو صاحب الدليل, and he is the companion of an intellectual proof. فهو على نور من ربه, and he is upon a light from his Lord. ممتزجا بكون من أجل فكره, but it's mixed with the creation, right? Because of his thinking. So it is the nur from Allah that's mixed with his own thinking. So it's not a pure light. فهذا يبعث أمة وحده كقص بن سعيدة. قص بن سعيدة, he's well known as someone who preceded the coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And he used to only worship God. So he'll be resurrected as a nation by himself, and those like him. فإنه ذكر في خطبته, because what's been reported in his speech shows ما يدل على, shows that فإنه ذكر المخلوقات واعتباره فيها وهذا هو فكرة, because it shows that he is thinking about the creation, right? And he's giving expression to that, and that's called fikr, that's called thought. Then he talks about the second level, and he says, وَمِنْهُمْ, well, amongst them is one who من وحد Allah, who makes God one, بنور وجده في قلبه, because of a light he finds in his heart, لا يقدر على دفعه من غير فكرة, and he's not able to repel it away by means of thought, ولا روية, or intellectual thinking, ولا نظرا, it's the same as intellectual thinking, ولا استدلالا, or by way of seeking proofs. فهم على نور من ربهم خالصا, they're upon a pure light from their Lord, غير ممتزج بقول, but this is an unmixed light, unlike the first category. فهؤلاء يحشرون أخفياء أبرياء, they will be resurrected as hidden and free people, a special category. ومنهم من ألقي في نفسه وطلع من كشفه لشدة نوره وصفاء سره لخلوص يقينه على منزلة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. And then there's someone who is cast into his own self, and he ascends by way of unveiling due to the strength of his light and the purity of his secret, and due to, again, the purity of his sincerity, his certainty, upon he actually sees the way station of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his mastery وسيادته وعموم رسالته, and the universality of Muhammad's message, باطنا من زمان Adam, right? Who was hidden during the time since of Adam alayhi salam إلى وقت هذا المكاشف, to the time of this unveiler, when he sees that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the light of Muhammad was present during the time of Adam, all the way up to his own time. So he believes in him. فآمن به في عالم الغيب, he believes in him in the world of the unseen, على شهادة منه, based on a witnessing that he saw from himself, وبينة من ربه, and based upon a proof from his Lord. وهو قوله تعالى, and this is the word of his Lord, أفمن كان على بينة من ربه ويتلوه شاهد منه يشهد, so he sees from that, يشهد له في قلبه بصدق ما كشف به, he sees in his heart, right? He's made witness in his heart the truth of that, of what was unveiled to him. فهذا, so he will be فهذا يحشر يوم القيامة في ضنائن خلقه, he will be resurrected on the day of judgment as one of God's beloved special ones, the special ones amongst creation. وفي باطنية محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم, and I guess باطنية might mean here the inward circle of Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. I think he doesn't say who this is. I think this is Khalid bin Sinan, and you'll come across him in the Fusus al-Hikam in the 26th chapter, so right towards the end of the book. I think this is Khalid bin Sinan, and you'll see why if you read that chapter. ومنهم من تبع ملة حقا ممن تقدمه كمن تهود وتنصر أو اتبع ملة إبراهيم. So from amongst them is one who follows a true religion, like Judaism or Christianity, or one of the religions of Abraham. Oh, man kana min anbiya, or whichever one of the prophets that he knows about. and he knows that they are messengers with God, who are calling to God, right? يدعون إلى الحق لطائفة مخصوصة, right? So he follows that particular religion and he believes in it. وآمن بهم وسلك سنهم, and he follows their customs. وحرم على نفسه ما حرمه ذلك الرسول. So he forbids himself what that particular prophet forbade himself because he's following that particular religion. وتعبد نفسه مع الله بشريعته. And so he causes himself to worship God in that particular sharia. وإن كان ذلك ليس بواجب, even if that's not, it's not obligatory upon him to do that, he chooses to do it. إذ لم يكن ذلك الرسول مبعوث إليه, since that messenger wasn't sent to him, but he chooses to follow him, God accepts it. فهذا يحشر مع ما تبعه يوم القيامة. He will be resurrected with that messenger, that particular messenger, on the day of judgment. ويتميز في زمرته, and he'll become distinguished amongst his group, right? In the outward sense. في ظاهرته, openly distinguished. إذ كان شرع ذلك النبي قد تقرر في ظاهره, since the law of that prophet was outwardly confirmed by God. And amongst them, ومنهم من طالع في كتب الأنبياء شرف Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. And then there's some of them who discover Muhammad and the honor of Muhammad in their books, right? And his religion in their books. And وثواب من اتبعه, and the reward of the one who follows him. فآمن به, so they believe in Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, وصدق على علم, and وإن لم يدخلوا في شرع نبي ممن تقدم وأتى بكرم الأخلاق. And so they confirm and believe in Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, even if they don't enter into the religion, right, of Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, obviously because it hasn't arrived yet. And they practice the makarim akhlaq, the acquisition of the good, noble character traits. فهذا أيضا, this one too will be resurrected as believers in Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, right? لا في العاملين ولكن في ظاهرته, in the outward sense. I guess ظاهرة here again means they will become openly part of Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم's religion on the day of judgment. They'll become manifestly visible, not hidden, right? ومنهم من آمن بنبيه وأدرك النبوة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم فآمن به فله أجران وهؤلاء كلهم سعداء عند الله. And amongst them is one who believed in his own prophet and reached the time of the prophethood of Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he believed in him. And this one has two rewards. Who is he? He is Ibn Barthamla, the son of Bartholomew, whom we came across in the 5th session. And all of these categories, they're all saved, felicitous with God. Now he comes to the categories who are not necessarily saved. Now listen to this. ومنهم من عطل, and amongst them is one who is an atheist. فلم يقرر بوجود, he does not believe in the existence of God, based on his intellectual thought. عن نظر قاصر, but his intellectual thought is deficient, because we hold that if your intellectual thought is sound, it will lead you to the existence of God. But if your intellectual thought leads you to atheism, into the non-existence of a God in the universe, then something's wrong with your thinking, according to us. So ذلك القصور هو بالنظر إليه غاية قوته لضعف في مزاجه عن قوة غيره. So he says that this deficiency is due to, his intellectual consideration is weaker than his other faculties, right? But غاية قوته, he has strived to use his intellect as much as he could, but his intellect wasn't as strong as the other faculties. ومنهم من عطل لا عن نظر بل عن تقليد فذلك شقي مطلق. But amongst them is the one who is an atheist, but not by way of intellectual thinking, just by way of following other people. عن تقليد. So that one is completely wretched. He's damned. And amongst them is one who does shirk, من أشرك عن نظر, but he does it by way of thinking. أخطأ, but he made a mistake. فيه طريقة الحق مع بذل مجهود. On the way to finding the truth, he made a mistake while he tried his utmost. بذل مجهود. He tried as hard as he could to find the truth. الذي تعطيه قوته, which his intellectual, faculty has given him. So this one has also made a mistake. The Shaykh Al-Akbar doesn't tell you what happens here, but it's obviously ijtihad. he's obviously rewarded. So is the first atheist. So the atheist who does ijtihad, he's rewarded. The mushriki who does ijtihad, he's rewarded. ومنهم من أشرك لا عن استقصاء نظر فذاك شقي. And then there's another group who does shirk, but not عن استقصاء. Istiqsa is called probing, intellectual inquiry. You are probing the matter as much as you can. So he doesn't do that. So he's wretched, he's damned. ومنهم من أشرك عن تقليد فذلك شقي. And there's obviously someone who does shirk by way of taqlid, he's obviously damned. ومنهم من عطل. And then amongst them is one who is an atheist, becomes an atheist, بعد ما أثبت عن نظر بلغ فيه أقصى القوة التي هو عليها لضعفها. It's the same kind of thing. He struggles to find out what is the truth due to using his intellectual faculty. This atheist is saved. ومنهم من عطل بعد ما أثبت لا عن استقصاء. And he doesn't do استقصاء, but he becomes an atheist, right? And it's also not by way of intellectual consideration, and it's not by way of taqlid. He's also damned. He's shaqi. فهذه كلها مراتب أهل فترة الذين ذكرناهم في هذا الباب. That's it. So just very briefly, why do we talk about the Ahl Fatra? Because they belong to the past, right? And once the religion of Muhammad comes, it abrogates what comes before that. But don't forget, his law includes all the paths that came before that, including these paths. So these paths can still be walked. You can walk on these paths. Some people can walk on these paths, but you have to have a hukm for it under his law. They still exist under his sharia. So how many different kinds of non-Abrahamic religions can these tools include, including what we did in the last session by way of ijtihad? With Confucius, you have the creation of governmental laws that aren't, strictly speaking, spiritual, not always, right? But it focuses on the preservation of family. That's from the Maqasid Sharia. Chuangzi and Lao Tzu, they have very spiritual paths. The 7 Indian rishis, they have their own laws. The Samkhya philosophical system, it's actually an atheistic system, but it's one that strives to release the spirit, the Purusha. Mahavira, who does ijtihad. The Christian monks who do Rahbaniya. Pythagoras, who follows his own law, and he forbids himself certain kinds of foods. And same with the other Greek philosophers who struggle to find out the truth. Socrates especially. He's a mujtahid for sure, for me at least. And what about the Japanese samurai who practice Bushido? They acquire the noble character traits because that's part of their religion. And what about Aristotle's acquisition of the virtues? That's also a law according to God. So next week, we're going to take a look at the tajaliyat and the divine names and what role they play in religious diversity. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Too much to process.
Yeah, I know.
I have actually. I have many.
Yeah, Sahar, go ahead, please.
Okay, because of the verse that you said about رهبانية ابتدعوها.
Yes.
Actually, I studied that in Surah Al-Hadid.
Nice.
And it's very interesting because I remember I would say that the complete verse ثم قفينا على آثارهم برسلنا وقفينا بعيسى ابن مريم وآتيناه الإنجيل وجعلنا في قلوب الذين اتبعوه رأفة وحكمة ورهبانية ابتدعوها. So it's all going to whomever followed عيسى ابن مريم.
That's the tafsir. That's the tafsir. Yes, you're right. Yes.
Yeah, أن رهبانية ابتدعوها ما كتبها عليهم إلا ابتداء رضوان الله فما رعوها حق رعايتها فأتينا الذين آمنوا منهم أجرهم وكثير منهم فاسقون.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's like when you said it, it's totally different than in my mind. So I'm trying to make the link between this ayah and between what you have said, because in my mind the رهبانية اللي ابتدعوها the extreme actually, because it's the Islam when it came with the balance, like, but you know, it was balanced. It not like extreme, because the رهبانية in المسيحية is the extremist, you know, like, you know, going and not getting married, and you know, so that was the meaning that reached me at that time, but now it's totally different. I don't know how to link it.
No,
You
because
got me?
because what you're thinking. So you see, each ayah هو عالم لحاله,
Subhanallah.
literally. So that's why what you're saying is correct, and what we're saying here is also correct. But it means you have to explain how each layer works, because each ayah has layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. So the first layer you're talking about is correct. There is this kind of when the ruhban, so ruhban, so it's actually talking about the ruhban, and I skipped the ruhban because you can always see we're always out of time, right? So I skipped the ruhban. I didn't do it in this session, but ruhban is connected to what word? Rahba, right?
Yes.
Which is rahab. And what's rahaba? It means khawf, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Sheikh Al-Akbar, he talks about that. And he says that the reason that these ruhban, they invented these harsh practices was because they're afraid of God's punishment. So it's correct for them to do it, right? And they have ra'fa for the people. They have mahabba, and they have ra'fa, and they have rahma for the people. So they don't want to oppress the people and do wrong things to them. So instead, they oppress themselves. And so he says, this is a sifa nabawiyya that goes back to Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam. And it's from the Quran when he tells his brother, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, Ya, I forget the actual verse, but he says like, Ya ibn ummi, don't grab me by my beard, don't grab me by my hair. So, and don't make my enemies laugh at me, right? And do shatama on me, right? So he says, it comes from that spiritual hal, that spiritual state, that spiritual awe when you are afraid of the world. Because we're all different kinds of people. We're not the same. And we grow up and live in different circumstances and different times. So the people who grew up afraid of the world, they can invent rulings that are harsher, that help them connect to God. That helps them connect them to God. So what he says is, if you are, because we talked about prophetic inheritance before, right? If you are a warith Haruni, you can increase rulings. But if you're a warith Muhammadi, what do we say about Rasulullah? He says, decrease the rulings. Decrease. I don't want to make ahkam. I want to make it less. So you're correct, Sahar. If you are warith Muhammadi, decrease the burden. But if you're warith Haruni, you increase the burden.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's
And then if
yeah, you know, I feel it, so I got it. It's yes.
so we're all different. And then Sheikh Al-Akbar says the second layer to the verse is that وَرَهْبَانِيًّا ابْتَدِعُهُ or ابْتَدَعُوهَا, it means sagehood. Because all you need is this one word from the Quran. ابْتَدَعُوهَا. It means inventing. It's a path they invented so that ابْتِغَاءَ رَضْوَانِ Allah. That's in the Quran. They want to find out what is God's pleasure. So they invent the path. God accepts it. If you say,
yes,
if you say وَكَثِيرٌ مِّنْهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ, that doesn't mean what they're doing is wrong. It means كَثِيرٌ مِّنْهُمْ, they don't stick to the law that they invented. Because now once you invent it, you have to stick to it. That's what it means.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. It's it makes sense now. Thank you so much. And I have actually another question, because I know that يعني it came to me while you were talking about the laws and about the
Yes.
Yeah, and all of that is I'm not really sure. Is it related to Sabi'in in Quran? Sabi'in?
That's so interesting. The Shaykh al-Akbar doesn't really talk about them that much, but it could be because what some of the Mufassirun say is that the Sabi'in, they're star worshippers,
Yes, yes.
but also other Mufassirun don't say that. But it doesn't have to be just about them. When you read the Quran carefully, it talks about many milal wa nahl. It talks about many of
Yes,
them.
exactly, and this is what's the next point. من الرسل من قصصنا عليك ومنهم من لم نقصص عليك. يعني there are messengers whom
Mm,
we narrated to you and whom we didn't narrate.
yes.
Like this is as well in Quran. So could they be not prophets, because the prophets is where Sharia is coming to them, but the messengers could be anyone who is putting the like divine law on earth, whether they
Mm.
know it or they don't know it, as you said. I don't know.
Okay, so okay, if there are messengers and prophets that Rasulullah SAW in his lifetime, in his body, when he was in his body, he was not told about them. They brought laws, they definitely knew it was from God. So now that's one category of people. Prophets who
Ah.
brought laws, they knew it. They knew for certain. Because if you're a prophet, you know 100% that your Sharia is from God. So now you've got another category beyond them of non-prophets, hukama. They don't know it's from God, but it is from God. The
But could they
inspiration is from
be
God.
messengers, yeah, Faris, Dr. Faris?
Um, if they're hukama, they are not messengers. They are not
Mm-hmm.
messengers. So
Interesting.
that's the distinction. If you know that your law is from God, then you are a messenger. But if you don't know that your law is from God, you're probably a hakim.
Mm.
So and then you have people, I don't know what to call like Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. I don't know what to call him because it seems like he knew where his law came from, but also he doesn't really talk about God explicitly. So that's like a vague possibility. Maybe Buddha is a messenger, or maybe he's a hakim, because there's a lot of ijtihad in his teachings. Mahavira is a mujtahid. He struggles until he gets to enlightenment.
Beautiful. This is so beautiful.
It's
And
really interesting. Yes.
yeah, this is beautiful, 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 because this is the first time to, to link that,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. And the last thing is
Yes.
when you mentioned العطل and الشرك, I
Yes.
couldn't know the difference between العطل and الشرك.
Okay. So the Mu'attila, he's called Mu'attila, he's an atheist.
Ah, and then الشرك.
The mushrik is not an atheist.
Aha, okay, okay, okay. So the atheist who doesn't believe that there is God, and the mushrik who believes that there is God, but there is one God more. I mean to do yeah, yeah, I got it.
وعنده شركاء.
عنده شركاء. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm
الله
grateful.
يبارك
Thank
فيكي.
you.
Thank you so much,
جزاك
Sahar.
الله كل خير.
Thank you so
I
much.
have a question.
Sure, yeah.
Why do we say ijtihad as a struggle and not another term?
Okay, I'll tell you. What other term are you thinking of?
I'm not, but like ijtihad, it
But
means
like why?
like تلميذ مجتهد, it means he makes effort, but struggle, it means
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
صراع.
Um, but yeah, you know what? I mean more effort. It's more about the effort. It could be a sirah, but it's more about the effort. I'm putting in a lot of effort to find out what the truth is. I like the word struggle just because it shows you there's a lot of effort you're putting into your search.
I don't know, but I feel the word struggle is a little bit suffocating, which is I'm struggling, you know what I mean? But if I'm doing effort to come up with something, it means there is more curiosity,
yeah.
there is more joy, there is more I want to know.
I mean, yeah. So struggle in English could be read both ways. It could mean the suffocating kind, but it could also just mean just the effort. It could be either one.
There's also, there's also the word striving, that's
Yes,
used. So maybe
perfect.
that's closer to what struggle is.
Yeah, that would be good, striving.
I like striving. Striving's really good. Okay, thank you so much for that. Yes, striving is a good way to call it. Also, and then badal mashhood is striving to your utmost, as much as you can.
So I have another question. What does mean بقوة وجدوها في نفوسهم?
The hukama, the uqala. In this case, it means due to a strength they found in themselves. The strength is intellectual strength and spiritual strength. It gave the ilham, gave them the strength to establish these laws that benefit people.
And then here, like, you know, when you say al-uqala, and then ilham min Allah.
Yes.
So al-uqala, you said intellect, and the intellect can grasp inspiration?
No. The uqala are people, they're men, okay? They are the men of the intellect. They can grasp inspiration. They can. Yes, they can. What they can to grasp
Because it's contradictory. I mean, like, you know, uqala, it means they are purely intellect, which is the mind. And then ilham, it's not received from the mind, it's received from the heart.
It is not contradictory, Ghada, because the way we use the word intellect today, it's different to the way they used it in the past. The aql in the past, it's connected to the angels. So when you say, for example, I'm intellectual today, we say I am an intellectual because I'm smart, because I'm a shatir and a dhaki. But in the past, if I said you're shatir or dhaki, that's just a small part of the intellect. That's a small part of it. But the bigger part of the aql is connected to the malaika. It's connected to nur al-ilahi. It's just not connected to what's called wahi. So the intellect, properly speaking, you use the old version of the word. From the past, it connects you to the angels, because the angels are intellects.
So if we speak about the Hermetic laws, when they speak that it's about the greater mind, which is, would that be that?
I think it could very well be that, absolutely. Because what do the philosophers, especially the Greek philosophers, what they want to do ittihad with? They want to join and have union with al-aql al-awwal. Al-aql al-awwal is not the smart person on this earth. Al-aql al-awwal is like the super physical, beyond physical, luminous light that made this world. Al-aql al-awwal, the first intellect. That's what it is. Al-aql al-awwal is a major angel.
Yeah, it's like the first actually Hermetic law is the universe is mental and all is mind.
Yes, I'm not familiar with the Hermetic law, but for sure, if they say that, they're talking about it in a way that's different to the way we use the word today. It has to be different. It can't be the same. It's different. Like when we say the mind, it's so much more than what we call the mind now.
Yeah. Okay, one last thing.
Sure, yeah.
زين له سوء عمله. Well, it's been here like اجتهاد.
Yes.
And you were saying اجتهاد comes on burhan. So here there is burhan for them?
Yes, but in this case, it's not so much about the burhan. I mean, Yeah, there is
It's
burhan.
about the intention, maybe here only.
No, you're right. There is burhan. It is about the intention, but the burhan, it's not like I rationally demonstrated why I think my conclusion is correct. The burhan here is more like I made an effort to see why my way is correct and beautiful, because it appears beautiful to me. So I have a burhan that shows, even though I'm doing the wrong action, I have a burhan to prove that it appeared beautiful to me. So yeah, there is a burhan. It's a proof. Yeah, it's my ithbat, the ithbat or the burhan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Sahar, go ahead.
It's something related to what Ghada said about the angels and and what you said about the thoughts, the mind, the العقل.
Yes. Yes.
Is it came to me, I'm not really sure, correct me if I'm wrong, is like as you know, the like we have like two sides, and it's like الشيطان يوسوس في بيوسوس برضو in the thoughts, because it's in the thoughts. The angels as well, I mean, the higher the vibrations, the higher the connection, then the angels as well can whisper to the mind, something like that. I mean, can like give inspiration
To their afkar, absolutely.
through أفكار, and it's the similar like للوسوسة, right? Is it? But I mean, of course, it's different. It's like the what do you call it? The other side, like two sides, one like that, one like that.
But also I'm just thinking about the Quran. الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس.
الصدور. You're
If you say
right.
if you say sudur, it's the heart.
Yes.
So you can have demonic inspiration in your thinking and your heart, both. Which is called khawatir shayatiniya.
Yes.
Or shaytaniya, yeah. So that's khawatir shaytaniya, and then you can also have khawatir malakiya, and you can also have khawatir rabbaniya. Absolutely.
So it could be as well in the heart and in the thoughts.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Beautiful. جزاك خير.
Allah يبارك فيكي. And asma, yes. So what they call the aql al-awwal, the nous, I completely agree with you. Yes, exactly. The nous of Plotinus and the Neoplatonists. Exactly. That is the nous. 100%. Yes. Guys, thank you so much for making it this far. I should have warned you, it would have been a slightly longer lesson, but Allah يبارك فيكم. Any other questions? Let's take them in the chat room. And see you guys next week. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you.